In certain ways, the intaglio printing process is the opposite of relief printing. Instead of the surface of the plate holding the ink is held by the areas below the surface. With the intaglio processes, the image is first cut, scratched, or etched into the surface of a metal plate. The printmaker then covers the surface of the plate with a viscous printing ink and wipes the surface clean. What's left is the ink that is still caught in the grooved portions of the plate. For printing, the artist then places dampened paper over the plate and passes it through the metal rollers of the printing press. The print is created when the ink is pulled out from the grooves of the plate onto the surface of the dampened paper. The pressure from the rollers of the printing press leaves a characteristic plate mark around the edge of the print, as illustrated in this etching by Kate Kolvitz. The plate mark is the shape of the plate, which has become physically embossed into the paper. Traditionally, intaglio plates were made from sheets of polished copper. Today, artists can choose from zinc, steel, aluminum, and even plastic plates. The three primary intaglio processes are engraving, dry point, and etching. For the process of engraving, lines are cut into the surface of a polished metal plate with a diamond-tipped tool called a burin. Using a considerable amount of strength, the artist must use the burin to groove out narrow strips of metal from the surface of the plate. The edges of the grooved areas are usually rough and must be sanded down to achieve the desired smoothness for printing. The Northern Renaissance artist Albrecht Dürer was well known for his highly detailed and symbolic engravings. These prints have the cleanness and crispness of an ink pen drawing. Old books would often include engraved illustrations such as these. Because of the difficulty of application, methodical, smooth lines are typical to the nature of the engraving process. Engravings can be found in the paper currency of this country. As with ink pen, a form of hatching must be used to describe any areas of value. This printing process of engraving stems from the older process of inscribing and decorating jewelry. One burin to rule them all. The process of dry point is very similar to that of engraving. Using the pencil-like burin, the artist digs lines into a soft copper or zinc plate. Unlike engraving, the edges of the grooved areas are not sanded down. The metal displaced by the burin leaves a rough edge that's similar to the row of earth left by a plow. The rough metal edge left by the burin is referred to as a burr. The burr catches the ink and, when printed, leaves a slightly blurred line. The burr is fragile, though, and it tends to deteriorate rapidly from the pressure of the printing press. Because of this, only small editions of dry point print can be made from one plate. The artist Via Selmans has also worked with dry point. These prints are able to translate a great amount of detail and delicacy. Etching is another intaglio process that starts with a metal plate, generally either copper or zinc. A ground of acid-resistant material is then applied to the surface of the plate. The ground for etching is usually a tar-like substance called asphaltum. The artist then draws into the ground with any sharp, pointed, or abrasive tool. Whatever's been drawn into the ground exposes the bare metal underneath. The plate is then submerged into a bath of acid, which bites or eats away at the exposed metal. The acid is then washed off with water, and the remaining ground can be removed with mineral spirits. After this, the plate can then be inked up and printed just like any other intaglio process. Rembrandt van Rijn was well known for his etchings. They have an effortlessly drawn aesthetic because it is much easier to draw into the ground of a plate than it is to create incisions into the surface of the plate itself. An artist can continually draw back into an etched plate by reapplying the ground and beginning the process over. Rembrandt was one artist in particular who is known for producing multiple states, or printed versions from a single plate. Aquatint is a variation of the etching process that can yield a print with more tonal variation than conventional etching. Instead of applying a solid ground to the plate is dusted with a consistent layer of powdered rosin. The powdered rosin has a similar speckled appearance to the static on a television screen. A butane torch is then used to melt the powdered rosin to the surface of the plate. Mineral spirits and a brush are then used to remove specific areas of the ground where the artist wants the darkest values. The plate is then dipped for a time in the acid bath. The artist may then remove the areas with the next darkest values and submerge the plate again in the acid. There are no maximum number of times that a plate with aquatint can be bitten by the acid. The areas that have been exposed to acid the longest will print the darkest value. The areas that were only in the final bath will print the lightest value, and the areas that were never exposed to the acid will remain the white of the paper. This process works because the areas with the deepest bite can physically trap more ink below the surface than the areas with the lightest bite. The Spanish artist Francisco Goya made many series of work combining aquatint with the conventional etching process. This series, entitled Los Caprichos, or The Nightmares, depicts many irrational and ghoulish scenes dreamed up by the artist's troubled mind.